University's Hybrid Masterclass Week 3. I'm Lauren Huffman, Director of Marketing Operations over at MeetingPlay Plus Eventry, and I'm so excited to be moderating today's session. Today, we are joined with Amanda Dennis and Debbie Seabloom from Type A, and we're going to be discussing reskilling the events workforce. Amanda currently holds the role as Associate Director at Type A Events and has been an integral member in bringing over 10 years of event experience to the team. She is a strategic planner, creative thinker, and innovator with a passion for managing the full spectrum of the event life cycle, from logistics, event technology, curating the attendee journey, to content development. Previous to her time at Type A Events, she was an internal planner in healthcare and the finance industry. When Amanda is not nerding out at other events, she is likely plotting her next theme party, biking around MPLS with friends, cooking up some mean curry dishes, and spending time with her family. Debbie Seabloom has been with Type A Events for over 11 years and brings over 17 years of experience in events with a direct focus on attendee experience and event strategy. Debbie is a multifaceted event designer and strategic thinker, consistently pushing events to the next level. When Debbie is not engaged on events, she is spending time reading or venturing outdoors with her husband and her 7-year-old son. To kick us off, Amanda will be walking us through today's session, and we'll be covering the pre-planning process of events in a post-pandemic world. That includes health and safety protocols and risk mitigation and contingency planning. And then afterwards, Debbie is going to be joining us and Amanda for a Q&A session. So please add some questions into the Q&A tab during the session, whatever comes up. And you can also add it in the chat too for us to cover at the end of the session. All right, Amanda, I'll kick it over to you. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you so much, Lauren, for that kind introduction. And I'm very excited to have Debbie join us at the conclusion of this session for a short Q&A segment. So what are we going to cover today? So a few of the things that I want to talk through are what we have learned over here at Type A as we pivoted our events from virtual to hybrid. There is certainly a learning curve. So we'll share some of the insights and skills that we have gleaned over the last year. One of the most important factors in being able to get back in person is creating a bulletproof health and safety plan. So again, we'll share some of the insights into how you can develop your plan and some tips for executing on site. And lastly, we're going to cover some risk mitigation and contingency planning. So we are definitely up against a new normal these days, and protecting your attendees and ensuring the success of your event will require a backup plan to your backup plan. So in true hybrid form, I would love to get some engagement from those of you who are watching. So let us know what some of your greatest hybrid planning challenges are. And also, please feel free to drop any questions that you have as we go through this presentation into the Q&A and chat. And then hopefully we'll be able to get to the majority of them at the end. All right, so to really shape this entire discussion, I think it's really important for us as event professionals to define what hybrid means in the current climate. Historically, hybrid was used as a term to define a singular event that kind of provided two interconnected experiences. I think what we've all learned during the pandemic and switching our events to virtuals is that we were able to significantly broaden our audience, and for some of us, even to a global reach. And I think because of the success that many of the industries and our organizations have saw with their virtual events, we are finding that even though everyone wants to get back to being in person, the virtual experience just simply is not going away. So I really try to emphasize when planning events with our clients that a hybrid event is not a singular event anymore. We are now planning not one, but two programs. And I think the key with hybrid is that you curate two dedicated experiences and find key moments to bring your two audiences together. So how do you begin the planning process for your event? Number one, always put digital first. While the current state of the pandemic is certainly improving, which we are all so excited about, we cannot predict the future. So future-proof your events and ensure that you have a solid virtual event plan. The reality is that you could pivot at any moment and sometimes on very short runways. I know we have been through that ourselves over here at Type A. So ensure that you prepare your virtual platform to host your event. It is your backup plan and it is your fail-safe in the case that that has to happen. So what I put together here is kind of a really high level visual to demonstrate how you can start thinking about the core function and design of your program and how those areas can manifest in both environments, hybrid and virtual. Planning a hybrid event is pretty intimidating because you have to deal with two separate audiences. You have to take into consideration the needs, the goals, and desires of both. But when mapping out the event design, don't take an all or nothing approach, especially if it's your first hybrid event. So, for example, rather than trying to live stream every single session, take a step back, assess your event goals, and then maybe kind of categorize them into a few different blocks. What are these sessions that absolutely must be live? What are the sessions that could maybe be semi-live, which is pre-recorded and kind of scheduled at a dedicated time? MeetingPlay has a great feature for semi-live where even your speakers can come on, they can mark themselves as available, and they can be live there via chat and Q&A to really interact with your audiences. So semi-live is a really safe way to go, and it's a really great way to go, and it offers a really solid experience. And then, of course, there's always the option to pre-record your content and have it available on demand for later viewing. So some of the things that I kind of broke out into this example here is, event technology. So of course, event technology is a really, really crucial component to your hybrid program. So starting to think about what are the different technologies that I need to be able to execute both my in-person and virtual event. And then what are some of those resources that are going to be used jointly between the two. So this is a really simple demonstration, of course, but mobile app for in-person, virtual platform for virtual, and then your registration CMS and event website. Those are obviously going to be joint tools that you use to execute both programs. I put merchandise here because everybody loves swag. And I think that when we pivoted a lot of our events virtual, we pre-shipped swag boxes to our attendees. It's a really great white glove experience. And especially if that was an important component of your in-person event and you plan to do it for the in-person side, maybe make a plan to find a way to build merchandise into the hybrid side as well. Activations and engagements. So this is crucial to building community at your event. And I think the really important thing to remember with activations and engagements is that there's a ton of options out there, but some of them are really more successful in the in-person environment, and some of them are more successful in the hybrid environment. So really make sure that you are selecting and curating which of those activations and engagements you are using in both of those environments. But definitely this is an area where we really highly suggest that you find some key activations that you can use for both audiences to bring them together. So I noted social feed and photo booth. This is a really fun option for both audiences to be posting pictures either from their home or, live from the networking lounge, and kind of bring them into a singular space where they can share and get excited about the event. Attendee networking, this is another one. There's a lot of great options out there. Some of them are going to fall flat in the virtual environment. So make sure that you're really choosing the networking options that are going to work best for your event. Again, another shout out to MeetingPlay. They have tons of really, really awesome virtual attendee networking functionality that you can use. So make sure that you're choosing the ones that work best in both environments. And I put networking rooms and podcasts as something that are really great joint opportunities. We've done those in the past and they've been really successful. Sponsorships, we really see these as being two separate entities when planning a hybrid event. When you are putting together your prospectus and when you're out there selling to your sponsors, don't forget to bring them into the virtual platform, because oftentimes you're dealing with a much larger pipeline on the virtual side, and you want to get them in front of that audience, that virtual audience, and they do as well. And, but what we really try to emphasize with our sponsors is that they really have to double staff if they are going to sign on to a package that has both a virtual and in-person offering. So make sure that that's communicated so they have dedicated staff for the virtual side of things and that they have dedicated staff for the in-person side of things. So evening events, this is one where typically we say there really is no great way to have a joint experience. You want to have an amazing welcome reception on site for your attendees. Maybe you want to take them off site to a venue, and that really just doesn't lend itself very well for the virtual audience. So make sure that you're selecting another really great opportunity that could maybe even serve as a networking option for your virtual attendees as well. The Go Game Virtual Team Building is a really great vendor. We've used them so many times, and they have such an awesome user-friendly platform. So I really suggest them. One of the things that I did put here under a joint option is that a lot of times when we're bringing in marquee DJs or bands, it's a great opportunity to be able to record them and then post them in the virtual platform for on-demand viewing later. So it's a nice double dip there, but evening events is definitely something where we say keep them separate, create two kind of dedicated experiences. And then we move into the content side of things. So this kind of goes back to what I was saying about what are the sessions that you absolutely want to have live. Keynotes are probably one of them. So make sure that you are kind of assessing your content plan and making decisions about what types of sessions need to be shared amongst both audiences. And maybe there are a set of sessions that need to just be virtual only, and maybe there are some that just need to be in person only. So really kind of start to think about that. So this is just a good exercise to start bucketing your event and really think about the design overall. So I won't spend a ton of time here, but I do think it's important for you to kind of map out what your attendee journey is going to be. It really drives how you develop your promotion and your comm strategy and how you communicate with your attendees. So you'll see here in kind of the first few touch points, we have attendees on a singular path, because during this phase, you are essentially clearly communicating and laying out the foundation for your program and what it has to offer. You're allowing attendees to see what the in-person and virtual packages are, and allowing them to make the decision about how they want to engage in your program. And then you'll start to see that when we get to kind of the know before you go moments, the few weeks leading up to your program, that's where we really start to see the audiences diverge. So you'll note that I have kind of the know before you go. Definitely make sure that you are creating two different communications to prepare your audiences for the events. There's a huge difference between what is happening on site and all of the, potentially health and safety measures that you have to communicate to your attendees versus what you have to communicate to your virtual attendees. You have to get them into your virtual platform. You need to make sure that they're comfortable, that they know how to navigate it, and that they know what to expect for the virtual event. And then, of course, we move into the difference between having a virtual platform, the mobile app. Maybe you have a few other technologies you're using on site. And then you'll see that I put this kind of dotted line because there is some connective tissue between the session content, of course. So, and then, of course, we move into the post-event comms. And, that tends to kind of bring the event back together and to really kind of think about the outcomes of that event and share the amazing experiences that both of your audiences have. I also think that this visual really lends itself to the fact that there truly is a divergence during the planning process where your task load doubles. So you are preparing two sets of experiences, two sets of comms, two sets of content. So I really can't emphasize enough, that hybrid really is double the lift. So make sure that you are planning accordingly with your teams, and that you understand that there's going to be a lot more workload when planning for the hybrid world. And, don't forget to rely on your vendors and your partners to serve as an extension of your team, because hybrid events really are a lot of work. So moving on to preparing your vendors and your partners. So as event professionals, we have always known that our vendors, partners, and venues are the thread that pulls our events together. And I really, really feel that now more than ever in this changing world of events, that we need to forge strong partnerships and lean on each other as we plan for the complexities of the hybrid world. So for your venues, many of them are just getting back on their feet. They're recovering from furloughs. They are dealing with hotel transfers of staff. And for some of them, they're being placed in entirely new roles. I know we just came off a program Our venue was amazing. Our CSMs were fantastic, but we definitely noticed that, there were some staff at the check-in desk who weren't just new to the property, but they seemed new to working in a hotel. And so it's really crucial that you make time to meet with your venues early and that you familiarize them with your program. And additionally, hotels are operating under new sets of requirements that maybe not were not in place when your contract was signed and potentially could change as you're moving through the planning process. So things surrounding food and beverage and social distancing, like all of those things could be an ever evolving thing. So make sure that you are making time to meet with your venues and plan accordingly. Additionally, technology is the foundation of your hybrid event. Major emphasis on that. So having reliable and tested event technology partners is key. We are all accustomed to our standard CMS registration and mobile app integrations, but what we're seeing in a hybrid model is that more and more providers are coming into the event tech ecosystem, and it is crucial that your providers are tested and willing to work with you. MeetingPlay has been an amazing provider for us, and we really do feel like they are an extension of our team, which is why we continue to go back to them to execute our virtual events. So here we have an example of, what an event tech ecosystem might be looking like for many of us now. We're no longer just dealing with those basic platforms that we had a few years back. We're seeing a large web of platforms that have to interact and speak with one another in order to support your program. And as a planner, some of the greatest challenges that I feel like I personally face is navigating these highly technical aspects of standing these platforms up, working on integrations, and getting these systems to work for you. And that's why we rely on event technology, because it is supposed to make your job as an event planner easier. But of course, in order for all of these different systems to work for you, they have to speak to one another. They have to be integrated. So here again is where I emphasize, the importance of having trusted partners. I cannot tell you how many times I have been on planning calls where I have to reiterate that, I'm not a developer. I consider myself a more technical person, but we really have to rely on our event tech providers to support us in ensuring that all of these integrations work and that we're setting up, a bulletproof event tech stack to support our program. Another complexity that we're seeing with hybrid events is the amount of pre-thought and planning that has to go into building your registration. Typically, your registration is really the first point of contact with your attendees, and you really have to make sure that you're setting yourself up to gain all of the required analytics, insights, and like ROI required for both in-person and virtual attendees. So oftentimes hybrid programs, the in-person program takes precedence, and maybe you walk away from your event and you realized, I should have collected a few different data points on my virtual attendees to feel like I could really walk away from this event and have a better understanding of the demographics and the outcome of the event. So when you're thinking about building out your registration, you should really, really think about your event design, what the goals of the program are, and potentially building in logic to create some different questions and experiences during that registration touch point to make sure that you're collecting those data points that you need from both audiences, because again, you are building two different event experiences. All right, so moving on to production. So to accommodate virtual attendees, enhanced audio-visual equipment, reliable Wi-Fi, streaming capabilities, and on-site tech experts are the new must-haves. There is always risk involved with live streaming. Our team in particular, we have experienced it two instances where large networking providers like AWS and Cloudflare have gone down, and it caused, a lapse in our keynote stream. And those are honestly some of the most unnerving moments of my career. And even though we had a bulletproof contingency plan equipped with redundant networks, backup embed codes, and even virtual stream fallbacks. When a large network like that goes down, your hands can somewhat be tied. So make sure that you're not skimping on your AV sets for those sessions, and that you are planning with your production providers a bulletproof plan to be able to support that stream. And if you don't, it's going to create a poorer experience for your in-person attendees and even a poorer experience for your virtual attendees. Another thing to think about is, of course, there's a lot of emphasis, funds, and budget that have to be put into, like, let's say, your general session. But when you start to think about some of your more ancillary programs or your breakout sessions, you really do want a solid camera shot of your speakers. You want sound audio, and you really want a clear presentation feed so that virtual attendees feel like they are in the room with the in-person attendees. So a lot of times when we get into this planning process with our clients, they think, well, like, can't we just have the speaker log into Zoom from their podium and share their presentation? And, it's really not that easy. You do want to be making decisions for some of those more mid-level content sessions to ensure that you are bolstering your AV capabilities so that your virtual attendees are going to have a really, really good experience. We always suggest that you get an irregular cadence of planning with both your venue technical team, and if you have a third party production team, bring them into the fold, and also with the virtual platform. All three of those providers really need to be in lockstep. There's a lot of infrastructure that has to be taken into consideration with your venue. And so making sure that you're bringing in that technical team from your venue, as well as your third party provider, all of these things have to talk to one another to be able to support the stream. So hybrid, and additionally hybrid programs, they inherently require more bandwidth, especially so your production teams can support their streams. The other thing that we're finding is really think about, what is the attendee experience that you're trying to set up on site for your in-person attendees? Are you going to allow them to maybe jump onto their mobile device and consume some of your on-demand content during a lunch or during a break? This is a lot different than, maybe what we saw pre-pandemic. So think about what the bandwidth usage is, or the use cases that your attendees are going to have on site to be consuming streams, or to be, logged into the mobile app, or maybe you're even bringing them into the virtual platform to consume on-demand content. All of those things are going to have a major impact on your bandwidth. So really do not underestimate this. If you have an internal IT team, definitely bring them in. For me, networking is like, somebody is speaking Latin to me, and I always rely on my technology partners to make sure that we have a really, really sound Wi-Fi and networking plan set forth, because it really is crucial for executing hybrid content. Okay, so moving into content planning, I think on another slide I had mentioned this, but content really is queen. I think we all know that. And there are a lot more variables that have to be taken into account when building content for a hybrid program. This ties a little bit into the production piece, but when you are planning to stream a session, you really need to think about what the structure of that session is. So will there be significant audience interaction? If so, ensure that the audience Q&A is captured on a mic. Even if it's in a small breakout room, you want to make sure that the virtual audience is able to hear the interaction and the Q&A that's happening from within that ballroom. And likewise, ensuring that they also have an opportunity to participate in active Q&A. So if you're planning to use ARS, don't choose a solution that's only for the in-person audience. We highly suggest that you engage the technologies of your virtual platform so that both audiences can take advantage of, some sort of audience interaction. Additionally, kind of understand the overall goal of the session. Is the emphasis on the speaker, or is it on the content? This has an impact on how your production team captures the session feed and what the virtual audience will see. So oftentimes, we encounter the need for stream sessions to have small group breakouts or roundtable discussions. This, of course, is very, very easy. when you're dealing with in-person attendees. But, how are you going to accommodate this for your virtual teams? We've come across this so many times during our planning process. And actually what we have found is that Zoom streams are a really great medium to use to allow your virtual attendees to have that same breakout experience and move into having smaller group discussions and then move back into the stream and kind of continue to watch the stand and deliver that's happening on stage. So again, with these few examples, you can really see that it's important to understand the structure of your stream sessions. I have found that the amount of time with our content planning teams has doubled when planning hybrid, just due to all of these intricacies and wanting to ensure that we offer a really, really great session experience for both audiences. And, for this very reason I mentioned early on, be selective about the sessions that you choose to stream. Streaming every single session will break your budget, and it might, spread your technical teams thin. So be really concerted about the decisions that you make and how you plan to deliver all of the different content that you're planning for your event. Speaker presentation or preparation, is also key to having a successful hybrid session. So make sure that they are prepared to interact with both audiences. This could be as simple as just asking them to greet both audiences when they get on stage or at some point during their presentation. Additionally, I think I had mentioned this previously, but having some sort of Q&A, maybe even serving up via a confidence monitor and allowing the speakers to see the live Q&A that's coming from both the in-person audience and the virtual audience is a really great reminder for that speaker to kind of continue to engage and understand that they're not just talking to the audience in front of them. They have a much broader audience with their virtual attendees. So making sure that they are making them feel included and engaged in the content. Additionally, I always like to prepare a speaker guide for my speakers, and this especially became crucial when we transitioned the majority of our clients into virtual events. But I think it's really important now because we have such enhanced AV in our rooms to be able to accommodate the hybrid content. Sometimes speakers just want to know, like, well, what's the setup going to look like in my room when I get there? Make sure that you are really clearly laying that out for them. And also for some of our speakers, they've been sitting behind a screen for 2 years. So this might be, some of the first times that they're getting back on stage. So there might be some nerves or discomfort there. So make sure that you are setting really clear expectations for what to expect when they get on site and present. And likewise, of course, there's always the option to, bring in a speaker virtual and have them streamed to the in-person audience. But so also making sure that that virtual speaker feels prepared for what to expect. And again, we can't forget that we're still in a pandemic, and it's possible that your speakers could become ill. They could test positive. We really recommend that you always prepare understudies to step in the case that one of your speakers cannot make it. Another thing that oftentimes gets lost in content planning is that hybrid events are typically servicing audiences from across the country and for a lot of us across the world. So take this into account when planning your agenda. Do you want to have regionally specific sessions, or perhaps you want to allow specific moments or times for your international audiences to have a dedicated networking session, or to maybe have, their own virtual session? So if you decide that you want regional content, we highly suggest that you plan accordingly for your staffing. I know that Type A has executed several international programs over the last 2 years, and we have been up against working overnights. And, we just got through a hybrid program that also had, regional content that was playing through the evening. And, we had to make a plan to stagger our staff on site. So, really think about that. Again, it's important to make sure that you're making your audiences feel included. So if you do have international attendees who are coming in, regional sessions are a really great way to make them feel included. MeetingPlay has a great regional deployment feature that can allow you to deploy some of your on-demand or even semi-live sessions within dedicated regions or time zones. And it's a really nice way to, again, make your international audiences feel included. And then finally, networking and engaging. People are so hungry to be back in person and see their peers again. And we have heard from so many attendees after they've come back in person for the first time that they want more networking time. So it can feel a little overwhelming right now for attendees to sit through a 5 or 6 hour keynote. So make sure that you are building in moments throughout your agenda to allow attendees to have that face-to-face time, whether that means you're extending your breaks, or you're extending your lunches, maybe you're shortening your keynote window. Depending on your event, engagement and face time can hold the same weight as your keynote. So don't neglect to build that time into your program, both virtually and in person. All right, so moving on to some budget considerations. So this one is big. We are seeing that hybrid events can cost up to 30 to 40% more than their in-person counterparts. So there are, of course, a lot of variables to consider, but we're seeing a few key large bucket items that are contributing to this. So the number one budget line that will increase is going to be your production and your event technology. And you cannot execute a successful event without your event tech providers. They are crucial to the success of your program. So make sure that you invest in quality services and vendors who are willing to go above and beyond to ensure the success of your program. Your virtual platform is going to be another. So like I mentioned before, put digital first. Don't skimp on your virtual platform because it is your fallback plan. So there are tons of virtual platform providers out there, all of whom offer different experiences and packages. If you're looking for a simple space to host your keynote, go for a planner built system like Socio. Hopin on 24 is great. If you're looking for more of a 360 solution, we recommend a provider like MeetingPlay. They have all of the features and all of the offerings that you could want to build out a full 360 virtual platform. So contingencies is another really great budget consideration. So we're all accustomed to building in those back pocket funds into your budget, but in a hybrid environment, oftentimes, you are actually paying for your contingency planning. So your contingency planning for your bandwidth, for your production team, some of those things where there are actual expenses associated with having to have a bulletproof contingency plan. So make sure that you are taking that into consideration and building that into your budget ahead of time. And finally, we're seeing that hybrid programs are being planned on tighter and tighter schedules. And with many, providers up against inflation, shipping increases, or even just being short on labor, we're seeing increased prices across the board. And oftentimes, vendors are not able to produce at the level that they were pre-pandemic. So we're getting hit with a lot of rush fees. So take that into account. Make sure that you're meeting with, all of your vendors ahead of time. You understand what their new runways are to be able to produce because they might not be the same as they were pre-pandemic. All right, so moving into health and safety. So this subject is, of course, top of mind for everyone who's bringing their attendees back in person. When planning your in-person program, there really is no silver bullet for the measures that you have to put in place. Of course, you want to make sure that you're consistently consulting your venue, local, state, and CDC guidelines to make the best and most informed decisions for on-site safety and requirements. But that being said, it really is up to the event organizers on how enhanced or pared down you want your health and safety protocol to be. But the ultimate goal is to ensure that your audience is going to feel safe. And at the end, that they feel that you took their health and safety into consideration. So a few things that I want to highlight when drafting your health and safety plan, which I should say you should have a health and safety plan, and it should be clearly communicated in all of your comms, posted on your event microsite, posted in registration. But, whatever your plan is, the most important thing is that you draft it early and clearly communicate to attendees and that you stick to it. A great example is, if in the beginning of your planning process, your venue is requiring masks or proof of vaccination, but then they later lift that requirement and then you also decide to lift it, there's the potential that a lot of attendees made the decision to attend your event based on those requirements being in place, and simply lifting them it has the potential to make them change their mind and move to attending virtual. So we really, really emphasize that whatever you decide for your plan, stick to it. Of course, there's always going to be changes and things that are out of your control, but the more ambiguity that you have in your on-site protocol, the more fear and frustration your attendees are going to have. That's why I put the quote here that, you build trust by reducing fear. Make sure that you are clearly communicating what your plans are. So whether or not, you are planning to provide on-site testing, we definitely still recommend that you prepare protocol for how you're going to deal with positive cases on site. Oftentimes there are company policies that have to be taken into account, but make sure that you've also consulted with your hotels on how they deal with positive cases in quarantine. They are obligated to house your attendees for the duration of their quarantine, but you want to make sure that you establish a line of communication in the case that they have specific on-site procedures, like a dedicated COVID floor. Maybe they have a dedicated number that you have to call for room service. All of this really should be clearly outlined in your health and safety plan, so that if your attendees understand that they're assuming a risk in coming in person, but make sure that you're kind of setting forth a plan for how you would support them if in the case they became positive. And then additionally, for international attendees, if you have an international audience, definitely make sure that you're providing resources for them. If you're not necessarily providing testing on site, a lot of countries require that you have a PCR test before leaving your country and also before coming back home. So make sure that you provide some resources for where they can go and get a test before their departure, whether that's, a lab that's nearby your venue, maybe it's being offered at the airport that they're departing from, whatever that is, really make sure that you get that clearly written out and in your protocol so that they feel like they have the information they need. So a lot of this I've kind of already hit on. Of course, a lot of your venues are going to have, preset health and safety parameters already in place. We've had experiences where our venues have been amazing and they have great practices. Highlight those. We are accustomed to what properties are now offering on site and how they've adapted for COVID, but your attendees might not be. So make sure you're meeting with them and understanding all of the things that they have in place, and get that up on, your website, or add that to your health and safety measures so that your attendees can see all of the things that are going to be set in place to make sure that they're having a really safe on-site experience. And then I added the know before you goes and FAQs. I think this is really important because attendees have so many questions. Oftentimes what we do is we pull some of the frequently asked questions that are coming through our customer service inbox, and we add them to the microsite, because if one person has that question, somebody else is going to have it as well. So make sure that you're kind of providing a space or place for attendees to ask their questions and get them answered for you. Okay, so really quickly here, I kind of put together 3 different scenarios for how you can build your on-site health and safety plan. Low is what we would consider the minimal provisions that you should plan for, and high would be the highest level of provisions that you could put in place. And I put dollar signs next to them because there are significant budget implications for the measures that you're willing to take. So at the high level here, we have, going to the extent of doing daily testing, which could be, you could do it daily or you could do it upon arrival and departure, requiring proof of vaccination and booster to attend, requiring masks. And then all of the subsequent pieces here are kind of the things that we see as being the baseline. But of course, again, there's no silver bullet for this. So it really is up to you as an organizer and as a planner to decide what are the provisions that you want to put in place. If you decide to go the route of requiring proof of vaccination, there are a lot of different routes that you can go and services that you can use, like Clear, Verify, CrowdPass. All of them have different offerings that allow attendees to either upload proof of vaccination, upload proof of negative test, whatever it is that you're deciding to do. There's a lot of providers out there, but what we're seeing is that there's some hesitation about putting personal data into a platform, even though a lot of these are CCPA and GDPR compliant. We have kind of found that just going the route of asking attendees to just show their vaccination card or proof of negative test at the registration so that you're not storing attendee data is a really easy and simple way to go. And we're seeing this with a lot of the larger conferences as well. So don't forget to kind of take that into account because, clear is great, of course, especially if you want to have admin access and you want to be able to have reporting, but just as simple as showing a vaccination card can work as well. So additionally, if you plan to go the route of providing on-site testing, I really suggest that you connect with your CVB to find a local lab provider that you can work with. We had the great pleasure of partnering with an Orange County hospital for an event that we just finished. Not only did they provide all of the on-site testing, and they were phenomenal, but they also provided us the option to have a clinical directorship, and it allowed us to meet with them on a regular cadence and really understand from a healthcare professional, what is going on in the pandemic, and what are the risks right now with, keeping this event live and in person. And luckily we were able to continue with an in-person event. So I definitely think this is a great opportunity, and I would connect with your CVB to figure out if any of your venues or events have this option. Okay, so I just kind of have some quick visuals here of some of the things that we are seeing on site. So food and beverage, of course, we are seeing the grab and go options. We are seeing that most buffets are, as contactless as possible. So having attendants there to serve. We're seeing a lot of plexiglass being used on buffets. So all of this is really standard. If you've already done an in-person event, this shouldn't be news to you. I think the greatest thing that we are now seeing is that a lot of our banquets teams are, they're not just providing cold sandwiches and coleslaw and fruit in a paper bag. We're seeing that they're getting really innovative and that this really is the new normal. So meet with your banquets teams early and let them know what your expectations are. Maybe you do want to have hot meal options. It's still possible to do grab and go and have hot meal options. So meet with them early. We have found that, they're getting really, really innovative with how they are managing the new kind of parameters and protocol that are in place for COVID. So contactless experience, we definitely think that, it's a really, really great thing to have. Of course, MeetingPlay has an awesome contactless registration check-in process, and we're seeing a lot of events use this. There's always the facial recognition piece as well. Sometimes this doesn't scale as well, so really think about the size of your program and which of these contactless options is going to work for your group. And then additionally, we've added in the wristbands. This is such an easy thing to do, and it takes the weight off the attendee feeling like they have to maybe communicate verbally what their, comfort level is for interaction. So having that wristband or something on your badge that says, hey, I'm in the yellow range. I'm more of an elbow bump kind of person. It's a super affordable, easy thing to do, and it makes a big difference for your attendees. So moving into room layouts here. So, when we were in the height of the pandemic, we saw a lot of room sets that looked like the one on the lower left, where we were pairing crescents down, with 2 chairs or having, cocktail rounds with a singular chair. We're not really seeing that anymore. Of course, distancing is still really, really important, but we're seeing a lot more spacing being placed within aisles and creating more elbow room during spaces and places where attendees are in transit. And what we're seeing a lot is more mixed seating options. So not just theater. Some attendees might be comfortable sitting elbow to elbow, but some attendees are going to be more comfortable sitting at a crescent round. So, think about, rather than having your general session be full theater, think about setting your room up with crescent rounds. It gives people a lot more room, and maybe throw some high boys in the back for people who prefer to stand. So lots of opportunities for or I guess just to say there's lots of options for room layouts, but meet with your venue and obviously consult your fire marshal, because we had a lot of great ideas for some of our events that really they got turned down by the fire marshal. So make sure that you're consulting your venue as you're putting these together and setting forth a plan for room layouts. And then of course, COVID signage. Again, this comes into the pre-event comms. Whatever plan you're setting forth for your attendees, make sure that you're relaying a consistent message for that on site. And, Type A has been on a few programs here where we have to, remind attendees to put masks on. And, sometimes it's not received well. And signage is a really easy way to make sure that your attendees understand that at any space and place that they're navigating on site at your event, what is the requirement there? Are you going to allow them to take their masks off when they're outside and, eating lunch in an outdoor space? Maybe in your expo hall, it's more of an open air space. And so there, you're not going to require masks, but they would be required in a session room. Whatever you're deciding, be really clear and have signage that reinforces it. It's the easiest way to hold people accountable. Okay, so we are getting close on time here, so I'm going to buzz through this. So risk mitigation and contingency planning. So one of the best ways that you can protect your event and your budget is to pay really close attention to your venue contract. So, we always want to find, or forge strong partnerships with our venues so that you can come to mutually agreeable terms. But of course, we still have to negotiate and protect ourselves. And some of the more important terms that we're seeing in the hybrid world are the same terms that we were negotiating during COVID. It's the resells, the rebooks, having a really strong, more force majeure clause. All of those are key. And we are seeing more and more, venues getting their staff back up to where it was post. So it never hurts to try to negotiate a level of service clause depending on the venue that you're at. If you're able to negotiate it, a cancellation clause that is specific to COVID also ensures protection, for pandemic related occurrences. And attrition is becoming more and more common with hybrid events. It is so difficult to project who will come in person, and any rise in COVID cases or new variants could cause attendees to revert back to virtual. So working on a force majeure clause related to the percent of attendees who are able to travel to your program, especially if you're up against international travel restrictions, some of these things are out of your control. So really work with your venues. They are excited to have you back in person. There's a lot of negotiation wiggle room, and make sure that you are kind of setting forth all of those same clauses that we did during COVID to protect your event. The other thing that I really suggest is to clearly outline your liability and commitments as you move through the planning process, so that any point during your event planning life cycle, you understand what your liabilities are. Don't just bring on your production provider and sign that contract with them 12 months in advance. What is kind of the latest point that you would want to sign them on? Because you don't want to be liable for them earlier than you need to be, especially, planning an event in a pandemic. So be really concerted about the moments and times that you are committing yourself to your vendors, committing yourself to contracts, and that you understand that at any point during that planning process, this is the liabilities that I am up against, and identify, with your team where that kind of point of no return is, right? Obviously, if you have to cancel your event due to COVID, it's out of your hands. There's nothing that you can do. But if you're still kind of on the fence about the in-person element, make sure that you're deciding, this is the date where we have to make a decision about being in person, because then we're going to be up against, X quantity of liabilities. So really mapping that out, as you're going through the planning process. And additionally, be really, really conservative with your room block. Unless you're dealing with a citywide, or you're dealing with an event where you have someone coming in before and after you and the hotel availability is limited, we're not really seeing that much. So, be conservative and account for attrition when you're booking your hotel blocks, because you can always kind of monitor your registration and make plans later on down the planning process to add additional rooms to your block. We've definitely been up against some slippage, and I think it's it's kind of the new normal. And so you really, really have to prepare for that. It is a little bit unavoidable. So we are just about at time here. So I would love to stop there and see if we can get Debbie on and maybe answer some of the questions that you might have.
Hey, Debbie, and thank you so much, Amanda. That was phenomenal. We have so much great engagement coming in. So thank you for the phenomenal information. We actually had a couple of requests too to have the deck be available for download. So we're actually going to make that available in our downloadable content after the session ends. We'll include it as a PDF, so there may be some delay, but we'll make sure tomorrow to send it out for everyone who attended and anyone who registered, so that way everyone can get a chance to see what Amanda put together. Awesome, and welcome, Debbie. Thank you so much for joining us for Q&A. Kind of the format that we'll go through here is I'll kind of ask you both some questions that our audience has put in no particular order. It's kind of just the way they came in as you were talking, Amanda, and then I'll kind of kick it over to you and see how you want to answer it.
Awesome.
Awesome. I'll start from the top. So Brandy asked, do you think there needs to be certain sessions available to the virtual audience?
I can take that piece. Yeah, I think that there should be content that is curated specifically for your virtual audience, for sure. It's an easy thing to do. And again, there's a lot of budget implications for trying to build the divide for every single one of your sessions. So, be concerted. And of course, the on-demand option is such a great option because it's available for your virtual attendees while your event is taking place. But you also have the option to potentially invite your in-person attendees into the virtual platform post-event and have them able to consume that content afterwards as well. So yeah, I think it's great to have virtual only content.
Awesome. Another one from Jessica. What is the best time to answer attendee questions and concerns during an event surrounding this new normal? So if they have questions around on-site protocols, do you answer them individually, or should you try to anticipate all questions in your pre-event communication plan?
Yeah, I can take that one. I think really it's hard to anticipate every single question that's going to come to you during the planning because it is rapidly changing, even every day. So I think what the best practice would be to put as many questions that you know and you have seen coming up, and even that you have in your personal life, put those into your FAQs. Right off from the get-go, what the decisions you've made with your team. What your policy and protocol is going to be. And then to Amanda, what she was saying, during the presentation is as you're seeing those questions come into the inbox, there's going to be more than one person who has that question. So just using it as a dynamic and always adding it to your FAQs kind of in real time so that you can help mitigate, that fear, that anxiety, because there is a lot of folks who haven't traveled, who haven't gone back to live events, and that your event might be their first event that they're coming back to.
That's great. Another one kind of around the virtual attendees is how do you get virtual attendees to start networking? So now that there's two different types of environments, we see that virtual networking takes a bit longer to get started. I don't know if you guys have seen that as well, but what are some good tips and tricks to kind of combat that and get people to start talking in that environment?
Well, incentivize them. Gamification is a great way to incentivize attendees into networking. But of course, if it comes down to content planning as well, make sure that you're thinking about who your virtual audience is and bringing in content and topics that people are going to be interested in. People are, just dying to have interactions and opportunities to be with one another. So, we've seen networking fall flat when we feel like, maybe the content team or we didn't have moderators who were fully up to speed, or maybe they didn't execute as well. So what we've seen is that networking works really, really well when you have solid content, your audience, people are going to be excited to come in there and ask questions. So be concerted about the networking opportunities that you choose. Awesome. Debbie, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think it is about making them comfortable.
Yeah.
I think everyone wants to be able to jump in and to talk and to have that interaction. It is a little harder to do that in a virtual setting because I think as humans, we like to interact in person. We read body language and we love those in-person interactions. So it is more difficult. But I think to Amanda's point is finding that content that is driven from your audience. They're going to be more willing and more comfortable to come in and have that conversation versus keeping it very formal. And I think that's, in general, a lot of the virtual piece becomes just a slight more casual than what you even might be doing in person.
Mhm.
That's great. And then I just forgot that we forgot to pull our poll up, Amanda. So let me display the results of the poll that we had today, and we can kind of layer that into our Q&A. Display results. It should be showing up on the screen here. Okay, great. So our poll today was, what are some of the greatest challenges you are seeing as a planner developing hybrid programs? It's looking like budget planning is a big one, probably in tandem with event tech and production management. So that's really interesting. What do you have to say about those results? Is that something you anticipated seeing?
Yeah, well, Debbie is our budget queen, so I'll let you jump in on that.
Yeah, I definitely think budget is hard because you're always anticipating what you don't know to anticipate. So you're really trying to look at it from all angles and really almost predict the future. One thing that we try to do at Type A is really look when we're doing those budgets, look at what's happening. I'm constantly reading what's happening, this day and then the next day and the next day in the news, and just keeping up on what is out there because with the world we're in right now, it's not always about the facts. It might just be with the noise that's out there, and that gives the anxiety level. So that might be increasing anxiety of people not coming. So they might not show up. So then you have attrition. And so there's all these factors that you have to be trying to piece together into a puzzle when you're doing a budget, and really put a good contingency in. So really buffer those areas in AV, some of the engagement virtual platform, those pieces already put contingency in there as its own layer, and then add another just contingency line. And if you're working with clients and it's not an internal, or even if you're working with your financial teams internally, they might push back. But I think you just have to show them, hey, here's what the event's really going to cost, and these are how I'm protecting us as a organization or as an agency, to make sure that we all know, going eyes wide open into this, that there are a lot of moving pieces, and it is a dynamic environment out there in events. So the most you can do is just keep adding layers into the areas that really pull on pivoting from maybe an in-person to hybrid, and then adding additional contingency when it comes to budget.
That's great. And I think that also ties in just budget planning into your event tech and production. I mean, that's, especially in this whole perspective, I think they kind of go hand in hand. And having kind of plan A, B, C, I mean, even through Z kind of covered as far as budget. So that's really good to see. I'll leave the poll up. Well, actually, I'm maybe blocking. Let's see if, there we go. I think it was hiding us. So I'll pop back into Q&A and keep it rolling. Okay, this is a good one. So are you seeing resistance with COVID-19 protocols at events, or are attendees who are attending live happy to go along with them since it kind of needs a safer event?
Yeah, I think, I think folks who might be feeling resistant are coming. I think most people, they're reading what the event protocol is, and whether they're weighing their comfort level one way or another. And then they're making their decision on that. So I do think for the majority of folks, when they come on site, they know what they're kind of expected to do and what the policy is. To Amanda's point, when she mentioned earlier, there are a few folks that you need to kind of remind, and sometimes you get a little bit of pushback. But to be fair, we are in an ever-changing daily cycle where today it's mass, tomorrow it's not. So it is confusing for your attendees. So I think it is just, again, communication, making it very clear from the get-go so that they can make an educated decision. So then when they get on site, they're willing to be there and to follow the protocol that you've kind of set in place.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to whatever the plan is that you set forth, stick to it, because the most frustrating thing for attendees is when you change your mind. Obviously, there are things that we cannot control, and maybe you weren't going to require masks, and now the venue requires masks, and there's nothing you can do about that. But make sure that you are being really, really clear in your communications, because that's what's going to set your attendees up for that experience on site, and that's what's going to eliminate the frustration.
Yes. We only have time for one more, and then just so everyone knows who's watching, we also have hallway chatter coming up after this, where we'll cover any questions that we missed. We'll have some MeetingPlay Plus Eventry folks in there to answer some hybrid related questions. So if we don't reach your question now, we'll definitely get to it later. So I'll do one last one. Let's do, okay, this is a good one to end. So I like the idea of power of choice. Is this now the reality of events kind of moving forward? Should all events now have a live and virtual offering? Or do you think that, now that everything's back to live, things will kind of go back to the way that they were?
I think it really depends on the type of event that you're planning. Like if you're planning a community or a user conference, I do not see that virtual is going to go away. Like hybrid is probably going to be the way of the future. If we're talking about a trade show or something that is more about like getting people in person to view like tangible things, like for sure they might, you know, make a plan to not opt in for the virtual option. But if it's a specific kind of event, I really do think that virtual is always going, well, not always, but for the next foreseeable future is going to be a part of it.
Great. Awesome. Well, Amanda, Debbie, thank you guys so much for joining us today. I think this was a great session. Well, we have some downloadable content, including this deck for everyone to have afterwards. This was our third session. Next week is our fourth. We are going to be joined with Jennifer Kellogg from MeetingPlay Plus Eventry and Brenda Brody from Pine Rock for choosing the right partners for your hybrid event. So it's kind of a nice segue into what we talked about today. So be sure to grab those downloadable contents. In addition, be sure to hit us up on the hallway chatter before you leave today. We'll be in there for about a half an hour. Just so you know what that is, it's a networking room where you can chat with everyone that's on today's session. You can come on camera if you'd like, or you can just stay in the chat. Well, I'll be headed over there. Some MeetingPlay folks will be over there, and we're going to continue on this great conversation around hybrid trends. And then lastly, be sure to share about this on social. We have the hashtag MPA University kind of up and running right now. So, you know, give some love to Amanda and Debbie on LinkedIn and all of their social networks, especially Type A. And yeah, that's it. Thank you guys so much for joining us, and we shall talk soon.
Awesome.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Everyone.